What I'm going to talk a little bit about is engagement, which is really the concept of the panel here. The activities and experiences, so we're talking about cognitive, emotional, and physical, right? This is your marketing class 101. We want to think, right? Cognitive, emotion, we want to feel, and physical, do, right? We want someone to do something. So this is the classic definition of engagement. From your marketing class back in college, right? We want people to think, feel, and do, right? That's a classic model about perceptions of a brand. And that means that they have a good experience with that brand. And that brand could be if you're a publisher, it works if you're an advertiser, and it works if you're in e-commerce. And what's really neat is a lot of you are entering and moving down that panel of e-commerce. And we heard some great experiences from Eric Bright yesterday with his marketplace. That's an amazing story, 4 million to 40 million in a handful of years. So this is the model. Gain consumer insights. So let's learn about our audience, take action to do something about it, and then improve customer experiences. So if we start with the insights, we might be able to do something like take a look at the timing of visits. Well, hopefully you're measuring your recency as one of your key performance indicators with your web analysts. And you understand what type of folks are coming back, how frequently. I work with a very large telco in the United States, and one of the things they learned is there's a segment that comes in and buys 7 days after they come in. And this is a large percentage of folks that come in and buy from this cable company 7 days after the first entrance into the website. They don't know why. At this point, it was a consumer insight. They found this insight. So we move on then to the actionable intelligence. What can we do? Well, in the case with this organization, so we'll just focus on the one on the left. These are just examples. With the actionable insights, you're able to time the messages, right? And then what they started figuring out was that these folks were moving apartments and moving their homes and needed to switch their cable company or buy a different package. So with that insight, how would you send a different message through a different medium? How would you behave differently if you had that insight? In their case, they started a whole email marketing campaign for those that came into the website that also they acquired information from third-party resources that said these people had the propensity to move. So they became likely candidates for an email marketing campaign, and that created a higher engagement for them. ROI on that project was in the 10,000 percentile. So let's switch gears now. We've talked about learning about our customer base, taking appropriate action, and driving revenue, right, with that model, very simple model. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time in this other model on the acquisition funnel. I'm going to be building up to a model that you may be able to use to identify your key performance indicators so that you are prepared to take action and create that customer engagement. So this acquisition funnel, again, from your marketing class in college, AIDA funnel, right? Awareness, interest, desire, action. Well, that was great for the classic M1A1 Army issued class in college about general marketing. Digital marketing is not 4 steps, it is 5 steps. Awareness, consideration, interest, preference, and conversion. Think about it this way. Awareness, impressions. Consideration, click-throughs. Interest, form starts. Could be something that they're doing to begin engaging with your content. Preference, form finishes. They download a white paper. They come back and comment on content that they're getting routinely in your finance section, for example, right? And we know something about their preference. This person prefers content with category affinity equal to finance, for example. And then finally conversion. So they registered and became a registered user of eltiempo.com, por ejemplo, right? So that's the 5-step funnel, but that's just to acquire the traffic and your customers and your audience. There's a whole other funnel beyond that. Congratulations. You've got Joaquin Jimenez and he signed up, right? Great. What are you going to do about it? How do you monetize that data? Well, If he's an inactive, an interactor, a joiner, a responder, or an ambassador, that's the engagement funnel. And there's more behind this, and I won't have time to go through each of the steps. But I just want you to understand there's a process to move folks to the engagement funnel. There's a great book called Groundswell that goes through this. We at Lima Consulting have our own methodology, but it's based on the Groundswell book. So you put this together, and you can start optimizing your pre-click activities. How do I drive traffic? We heard some great examples of being able to bring those in through social media and bringing folks in sideways yesterday. Then the conversion, there's A/B testing, multivariate testing. There's solutions that you can measure micro-conversion, so things that might not be significant, maybe for example the purchase of the home advertisement from Eric Bright's study yesterday, a resource pitch. But some of these micro-conversions might be that they've done searches and they're engaging with a search in your classified section. And then leveraging the segmentation in your data to understand this is a home buyer, right? And you can purchase third-party cookies from companies like BlueKai that can inform your third-party visibility onto those cookies. And then finally, optimizing the customer experience for post-conversion. If you have a call center or an e-commerce part of your organization, this is huge. And what we've done for Oi in Brazil, which spends nearly $1 billion US on that call center, 60,000 customer agents. We've helped them reduce those costs by 17% with this technology or this technique. So you put this together, and this is the killer slide. This is the engagement funnel, and you put all this together, what I've talked about: awareness, consideration, interest, purchase, or in your case, registration. Then you move them through the engagement funnel. We've talked about the top half. What are all these circles on the bottom? Well, there's value-added services. Anything that you're giving away for free. For a telco, it would be automatic statements. It could be also things like billing that's done every month. Cross-channel upsells. Deseret News has 10 channels just in the marketplace, right? So you can start moving folks. And by the way, when you do a value-added service, there's a funnel. It's awareness, consideration, interest, preference, purchase. So when you start developing your key performance indicators, you can't measure all of these. Those are metrics. You get to measure 3. You got to pick which 3. And a lot of media organizations, it's the third one, interest. Right? They want to have longer time on site, more ad impressions, right? And you get to pick 3 of these funnels, or these dots on the funnel, these locations on the funnel, and build out your key performance indicators for that. I'm going to wrap up with 2 very important key performance indicators. If you're not measuring these, you should. Just by a show of hands, how many folks are paying for their analytics product? We've got just a few. Okay, I only see a few. So Google Analytics, anyone paying for Google Analytics, the premium version? Okay, Adobe Analytics, keep your hands up please. Adobe Analytics, Core Metrics, Web Trends, right? Okay, so we have about 5% of us here. Today in the keynote, I'm going to talk to you about what we did with the research of 250 of the largest media companies and what they're using and how they're measuring and tagging that information. The participation rate and content velocity, for those that are using Adobe Analytics, you can just turn some of these things on. You have to call back to the center over there to turn them on. What is participation? Participation counts each page or piece of content that has a downstream conversion event. So this solves the problem of the last click. Usually that piece of content that, so Joaquin Jimenez, he registered. What was the last article he looked at? That article gets 100% of the credit. That's not fair. He looked at 12 articles over the last 3 days. Why don't all 12 of those articles get a point? That's participation rate. And when you start looking at those articles that attributed to Joaquin's eventual registration, you start to find the golden nuggets. These articles are so valuable that even though in the absolute order of things, they might be only a few numbers, very small amount of views. But when someone looks at those articles, they register. And that's what participation is about. And the content velocity is an associated metric. It allows you to see which of your content is best at accelerating user engagement. In other words, which content accelerates or drives additional views. So in one of the systems, this is how you would actually look at it. You would look at the page count of a particular resource and divide that by the visits. This is a calculated field in your analytics. And if you look at games, it's number 5, right? Games, it only had 8 million page counts relative to 286 million page counts or page views. So if you just looked for games, it's very low on the list relative to everything else on the list. Look at some of the leaders, 34 million, 45 million. But look at that right column. Here's the content velocity. 178% more likely to view content from those on the average. So that number 10 in the upper right, the section average here, that's the list of hundreds of thousands of pages. So if you look at the math, if it's not 10 on the average of what's shown on the screen. This is all of the pages. So that piece of content is a golden nugget in a river of thousands of pages. And if you looked for at 8 million pages, you say, well, that's nothing. But if someone comes in off of games, they're going to view a lot more content. The next thing is to segment. So the old Chinese adage, let 1,000 flowers bloom, that's a crime. And if you're measuring things like page views and impressions, don't do the time. Avoid the crime. If you were in the business of selling and creating flowers, would you want those little red ones? I'll tell you what, I've talked to the finance folks at Deseret Digital Media. He hates the red flowers. He likes the gold ones. He likes the green ones, right? So if you were in the business of trying to generate audience and create audience, segment and then do your analysis using filters like this. So we just showed you the participation rate and the conversion, the page velocity. You can then look at that and say, okay, we like the games. We saw that it had a very high likelihood to convert, but now we can look at these segments in some of these tools and say, I want to segment my Facebook users who came in off the game relative to the average user, right? And the insights you get on that are incredible. Some of the ROIs on these projects are incredible. So I'm going to wrap up with the maturity model. And this is the analytics maturity model, and it's developed in conjunction with an organization called INFORMS, the Institute for Operations Research and Management Sciences. I'm the vice chairman for that committee, for the subcommittee on maturity, analytics maturity, and that's the Society for Big Data Scientists. And it starts out with descriptive analytics and diagnostic, and most of you were in this stage, and I can tell because I just did this analysis, which I'll show later tonight, of the top 250 websites globally in media, or in the US. And the first is a negative ROI. It's around getting the data, just measuring it. And if we're just looking at the data and not doing anything with it, that doesn't generate any dollars back. The diagnostic is causal. I'm able to start identifying what changed. And I know in the organization that if I press on the organism here, I get something good that happens over there. But I don't know why. It's like the example I gave around that 7 days. But we didn't find out later on until we had gone through the data that it was the movers. When we found out the movers, that's when we were in the predictive. And everybody wants to get to the predictive. That's the holy grail. I want to be able to decision my content, products, and ads based on the segments. And I can't tell you how many organizations and executives just say, oh, well, we're going to bring in a predictive capability. Great. That's the third floor. But nobody wants to talk about the concrete in the building, right? That's not very sexy. That's data, right? They want to talk about decision sciences. So the ROI on predictive is, in many cases, I've seen over 10,000% ROI. I don't have time to go through the analytics maturity model. I'll talk a little bit more about that this afternoon in the keynote address. But I am going to wrap up with these very quickly here with this notion around looking at descriptive, what happened, diagnostic, why did it happen, that's the causal relationship, the predictive, which is what will happen, And finally, what should I do? And now, when you work through these, the analytics only gets you a part of the way. You still need a business analyst with human input on the descriptive, the first line, to do something about it. You make a decision and then take an action and understand what's good. We helped Univision figure out what's good on their homepage. But what's good Tuesday at 10 o'clock? What are we going to do about that? So those organizations that leverage the data are getting significant returns on these investments. Some of the data scientists that when they come in, and at Lima we have a team of folks that do this, they can have ROIs, again, at over 10,000% on just gaining some of those insights. So that concludes my presentation. I'll go ahead and tweet this deck for those of you who were taking pictures or what have you. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll see the deck, and you can go ahead and download that. So thank you, Ricardo, Matt, for allowing me to speak today. This was a real honor.